As a very quick introduction to myself, so you understand where my craziness comes from, I am a political scientist by training, with what I'm told was a focus on comparative environmental policy. So I began as a researcher actually looking at environmental policy in the European Union post-1991, at the end of the Soviet Union, and basically the environmental set of travesties that existed in East Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, and other places under Soviet rule, and which people are still dealing with in many cases today from a number of different standpoints. Somehow from that I have ended up in Camrose working on rural development and many other things. And it all actually fits together. It's a very rich tapestry. But ironically, one of the key questions that has come up within a European context since World War II has been one of integration at a political level, and at an economic level, and at a policy level, and at a cultural and social level. And stemming from that, and with work that I've done related to the social determinants of health and to environmental policy around forests and fisheries in maritime Canada, it has continuously struck me, as I mentioned before, that we tend to pay lip service to the question of integration. And it's present if you look in any textbook on environmental management, on assessment, on watershed management. We see references made to integration, we see references to transmedia, but we don't actually see a significant, or what in my mind would be detailed kind of thinking around what does this actually mean, practically, theoretically, how might we model it, what do we mean by integration? It's just an easy word, we need to integrate, great, it's done. And stemming from that, I thought perhaps we should think a little bit more carefully at an interdisciplinary level around what we mean by integration. And keeping in mind that these are the overarching goals of this workshop, which are to recognize and examine the dynamics and functions present in watershed level analyses, the need to work at the level in a way that acknowledges integrative watershed management and planning, and to address and recognize issues of both horizontal and vertical integration across multiple spheres, as I mentioned before. There are some things that we might need to talk about. In particular, we need to think about, in my opinion, first of all, why it is that integration has become such a buzzword, why it's so predominant. It definitely has value, but what do we mean when we use the term integration? How do we theorize about it? In what ways do we actually think about integration, causally, descriptively? How do we use it, include it, conceptualize it when we evaluate? Do we in fact evaluate? Can one evaluate? Can one program in an integrated or integrative way? And how do we then actually think in a comprehensive way across issues of extreme complexity, of non-linear causality, of recursivity, right, of mutual reinforcement? And how do we translate this and apply this into effective practice across multiple policy domains at multiple levels, from the smallest local community up to some of the gigantic watersheds that we have in this country? And how do we actually think about integration as not a problem to be solved, well, that's certainly part of it, but rather a larger question that we have to engage with. And not because we're being told that we should do so, but recognizing that in many ways we are being told to do so, and that we need to think about what it is we're being asked to do, what the implications of doing this will be, and how we might think about what in the policy world we call the law of unanticipated consequences, and how through the process of integration it is that we may, in fact, actually generate, as has been the case historically, more problems than we've actually set out to solve. And what that kind of awareness might bring to our thinking. And in fact, this is consistent with something that was raised for me at a meeting, and this is a non-Canadian example, because I don't want to be too close to home, and that's the Ganga River in India. I was at a meeting recently because the University of Alberta is now a core partner in a large initiative that is watershed-wide for the Ganga, which is a massive, massive complex. And the driver behind this is the fact that there have been millions of dollars invested into that river, into watershed management, into cleanup, into abatement, into regulatory policy, into enforcement, into evaluation, you name it. And the consensus is it has not done anything. That for every dollar that's been spent, 2 or 3 more are required to deal with either spill-off or other issues that have been identified. And this is maybe something that we should think about, something that we should be concerned about. And so in turn, we do have a pattern, historically, that is derived from science, is derived from the emergence of public policy as sort of a field that attempts to be somewhat scientific around the practice of policy making that can create significant problems. And so, in turn, we've seen this term, integrated, come forward across multiple fields. And where does integrated come from? So a quick lesson in Latin. Anybody take Latin? 1, 2, oh good. Oh, it's like a guilty secret, right? My name is Lars and I studied Latin in 1981. So there are 2 key terms here that we need to consider. Integrare, make whole, and integer, i.e. whole. Integrare is derived from integer. Integer, some of you might have heard of before, in perhaps a different context. Right? This is grade 3 math, I think, grade 5. The point being, we do have, linguistically, and of course then conceptually, long practice of thinking about this idea of wholeness, of inclusivity, of one, right? And in the context of sort of contemporary challenges that we face from a policy and practitioner standpoint across many, many different domains, whether they're public health, environmental management, social policy, you name it, it is a response to some of the broader patterns that we've seen over recent decades. These are the tendency towards top-down, directed type of policy and decision-making, the predominance of what Frank Fisher has termed technocracy, or the politics of expertise. And leaving that aside, the war on evidence is not a positive counter to technocracy. The fact that decision-making and policy-making is often ad hoc, highly, highly sectoral by design, and intensely specialized. Some of you may be familiar with the term inch-wide, mile-deep, to refer to particularly academic expertise and knowledge, and the difficulties that it creates in what's called a siloed approach or a siloed context, when we try to combine perspectives derived from academia with practice. It's an ongoing challenge. And integration is an attempt to move a little bit away from the inch-wide, mile-deep, and at least have lots and lots of things that are 2 inches wide and half a mile deep, that are connected to each other, that overlap. In the context of the environment more broadly, and particularly with regards to water, I always come back to a quote by a gentleman who was actually a professor of mine at Purdue, Rob Bartlett, and that is, what must be done cannot be done. One cannot be truly comprehensive. You cannot think about everything. It is cognitively impossible. We cannot include everything. We cannot model everything. We cannot monitor everything. We cannot theorize everything. And yet, we have, as an overarching principle, a desire and a goal that is both normative or ethical, something we should do, as well as practical, because we know it has implications for how things work, that asks us to be as comprehensive and as integrated as possible. Fundamentally, then, we have a definition, a working definition for integration. There are variations on this, and you're certainly welcome to have your own and to disagree with this one. And that is that when we talk about integration in the context of environmental management more broadly, we're talking about some form of coordination